Hey everybody, it's me Margaret sharing a free pattern and video tutorial for this faux button front top for 18-inch dolls. I love the ruffled hem and it's fully lined too. Check the link in the description box below to find the pattern. It's available for download at a PDF file format. And be sure when printing that you indicate actual size and not shrink to fit so that the pattern will be the intended size. So I've printed out my pattern on this bright pink paper, and you're going to notice a 1-inch test square up here. You'll want to make sure that you check that and make sure that it does measure 1 inch on both the horizontal and vertical sizes, and that'll make sure that you have printed this at the appropriate proportion. So I've cut out my pattern pieces as directed. Tells you exactly what to do right here, your fabric and your lining. And then here, up in the top corner, it gave you instructions for the ruffle, which said to cut out a strip of the fashion fabric that measures 3 inches by 24. Now, I was using a fat quarter, and so I didn't have enough to do one continuous 24-inch strip. So basically what I did was cut pieces and pieced it together. I just added a 1/4 inch for seam allowances so that I could do those together, and so it works the same. Let's divide it up between lining and fabric, and basically what we do is right sides together, join them at the shoulder seams. Now if you feel it's necessary to place a pin to carry it over there to the machine, fine, pin it in place. I always cheat and just hold it in place. So using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you want to join the shoulders of both your lining and your fabric. Okay, so I've completed the shoulders, I've pressed the seams open, and now we go to the next step, which is to place the front on the front lining, right sides together. So this is the right side of the lining, and we place the front on the lining, right sides together, and we'll line all this up. I'm very careful to align the seams. Get those seams just right. That's the first thing that I do. Then line all the edges up. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew. This is the front. These are 2 front pieces. I'm going to sew up here, around the neck, and back down again. Okay, so I've sewn all right there as I indicated, and now we're going to do the armholes, and you merely do this little C shape on each side. Now this next part is very important. We're going to clip the curves. So wherever you have a nice rounded curve, you want to make some clips. Some people make little triangles like this to cut out to relieve some bulk when we turn it around. I haven't found that to be that necessary in this, but if you feel like it, do it. You want to go as close to the stitching as you can, but of course don't cut your stitching. You want to do the other armhole over here, and then of course around this neckline. And one other place we'll want to cut are corners, because we're going to turn this inside out and we don't want bulky corners. We want nice square corners. Sometimes I'll slim them up right there as well. Okay, so now we need to turn it right side out. So I like to start on the big piece and pull the smaller pieces through. Now it's going to seem really difficult, but just be patient, and it keeps coming slowly but surely. Okay, so where's that corner that we clipped? It is right here. And use a little point turner to see if you can get that a little sharper. I got this free from some sewing book and I have held on to it for years, and I really like it. Now here you have what appears to be a mess, but I think irons work magic when it comes to sewing and the clipping of the curves. The reason why we do that is because it makes it lay so flat. There's no tugging and pulling or anything like that. You see how nice and crisp that looks already? I love this part. Try not to let your lining show. That's really a good idea if you have enough of the same fabric to let it self-face. You just kind of have to wiggle it to make sure that you've got it all the way up to that thread, so that it's literally folding over the thread. Take your time on this because good pressing makes your project look professional. And you see how nice and crisp your curves are because you did the clipping. Some people may find this part tedious, but I love it because the payoff in the end is totally worth it. See it? My lining is showing right there. Can you tell that? I don't like that, so I'm going to fix it with some more wiggling. And it looks so much better now that it's pressed. So now we're going to do the side seams. Now in this case, it's important to remember that you're going to do fabric to fabric and lining to lining. Like that. Once you do that, go ahead and match up those seams right there. And you'll see it's not exactly a horizontal line. There's going to be a slight pivot right there. Zip, zip. Okay, so both of them have been done, and what we'll do now is take it back to the ironing board and press those seams nice and flat. Now the next part is the ruffle. So if you'll look at the second page of your written instructions, you're going to see that you have actually two different methods. Obviously the serger method is going to be the quickest and easiest. See, it's only got 2 steps right here, and generally people who own a serger are going to know exactly what to do here. So let's focus on this first method. What you'll have with this method is a nice covered finished edge. You'll see the top of the raw edges of the ruffle are kind of encased inside this nice little finished edge, as opposed to the serged version where you're serging all the layers together, right sides together, and then you flip down the ruffle and you can see this on the inside of the outfit. This is faster and more efficient, but this looks so much nicer. Okay, so following option 1 there, what I'm going to do is turn under about a 1/4 inch on the lining side, and this could be a little bit tricky because we have sewn that together, but it all works out in the end. So just kind of fold that down like that and press under all the way across for the lining. So to prepare the ruffle for the next step, we're going to fold it right sides together, and then we're going to sew these ends closed, both ends. So I've sewn the ends and I've clipped the corners, and now we're going to turn it right side out. And here's where you're going to want to use your little point turner again to get those points sharp. Go ahead and turn it right side out and then press it so that it's nice and sharp. Now here's where we're going to gather the ruffle along the raw edge right here. There's plenty of YouTube videos that give you all kinds of tips and tricks. Now for doll clothes, I take a shortcut. I mean, this is only 24 inches, so it's not that big of a deal. So I will be sewing this at 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to go just under a 1/4 inch using the longest stitch possible on my machine and go all the way across. And then I pull the bobbin threads to create the gathers. So you can see the long stitches right there. Mine is a 5mm stitch. So we'll need to pin it to the right side of the fabric. So turn it upside down with the right side facing you. And here's how I try to keep my gathers as even as possible. I pin it first to this end, making sure I'm not piercing that thread right there. And then I pin it over here to this end. And you don't want to cut these strings off because you'll be pulling those together. So just kind of get them out of the way. Like that. Now, I took this over to the ironing board and I pressed a little crease to show me where the middle was. And I have a little crease right here in the ruffle where the middle is. And I'll line those up. Then I grab the bobbin thread and start to gather very slowly and gently because I don't want to break that thread. We're taught that we should often run 2 lines in case one breaks, but I like to live dangerously when sewing doll clothes. And I keep working with that until I have even gathers between my pins. Okay, so I've pinned the whole thing. I think my gathers look pretty even all the way across. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam to attach the ruffle to the right side of the fabric. Okay, so it's sewn on there, and what we're going to do is press it. See how it's sticking up like this? We're going to press it down where it makes a nice little neat ruffle. And where we folded it earlier, it'll come around and encase those raw edges. Like so. Now you've got 2 options here. I think the quote-unquote proper way would be to hand stitch that over there. But I am a horrible hand stitcher. But we're working with doll clothes, so we have a pretty interesting option here in that these clothes are not going to be constantly washed like our own human clothes might be. So the wear and tear is not quite the same. So you could use some fusible webbing and just iron it on and it'll stay forever. You can even wash it that way. Even hot glue is a great option for doll clothes. So the choice is up to you. Here it is so far. I used some fusible web underneath there. Then in sewing, sometimes things don't come out perfectly, so I noticed that when I got to this end that too much of my white lining was showing, so I just kind of took a tuck in it and I put some more of this webbing, put it under there, and guess what? Nobody's ever going to notice. This is a little more than a 1/2 inch wide. I'm not sure if it comes in different widths or not, but I just cut mine. I just cut it in half and then I just used the small amount right there. I hadn't intended to film the serging option because I thought, well, not everybody has a serger. People who have sergers generally know what to do, but I decided against it because you can actually achieve the same thing with a zigzag stitch, and I was just completely forgetting about that. So let's go over that real quickly in case you want to do that shortcut version. So pretend this is the right side of the bodice and that you have followed all the instructions given in the other option for attaching your ruffle. Now, let me flip it around because I'm right-handed. When you attach it, you're going to make sure that you're attaching right sides to right sides, and you want to make sure that you're pinning through all 3 layers: the lining, the fabric part, the bodice part, and then your ruffle. And I like to take it over to the sewing machine first to run that 1/4 inch seam allowance right through all 3 layers. And then you'll run it through the serger, and you don't need much cut off. So what I do is generally follow my line of stitching to make sure that the left needle is right in line with my line of stitching, and serge the whole thing. Alternatively, you could use a regular machine, and you could use a regular zigzag stitch, or I like this overcast stitch over here that would also sort of simulate a serger. And then after you've serged it, you flip down your ruffle and press it. Now here's Evie Kate trying it on for us, and you can see that you do have enough room. If you want to sew the buttons on and create buttonholes, you actually do have enough room to do that. Now I'm not going to do that, and of course it doesn't matter because either way is beneficial. I'm thinking that sometimes smaller hands have difficulty working buttons and buttonholes, but on the other hand, it could be beneficial and used as a teaching tool. So it's up to you. What do you want to do? So now you'll need 3 buttons of your choice. I just happen to have these browns, so I'm going to keep everything real natural looking. And I space them out just on this portion. Don't bother with the ruffle, and get them exactly like you like them. These happen to be 1/2 inch, or just hold the buttons up there and see if you like the way they look. And don't get too wrapped up in exactly what size I used. See what you have, see what looks good. I'm going to sew these on first, but again, you don't have to sew them on. You can glue them on with hot glue or fabric glue or something like that. Now I'm going to hot glue my Velcro on, and the way I do it is I turn it upside down so it's more like I'm wearing it, so I'll know which side is which. And so what I like to do is, here's my 2 Velcro pieces. I like to put the soft piece as the one that's facing up, and then I put the rough piece over here on the underside of the one that goes on top. Okay, so I go ahead and put the hot glue, and I'll kind of align it on the edges, pressing as I go. And you'll know it's good and hot and it's adhered if you can kind of see through it right there. I can kind of see the glue. If it's long, go in small portions so your glue stays nice and hot when you adhere it. And it's okay if it bleeds over because it pulls off. You'd rather have too much glue than not enough. So let it cool, and then we can release that blob. In the meantime, go over here, and I'll start right over these buttons. And adhere my rough side of the Velcro. Now I have sewn Velcro on because I thought that was going to be more secure, but actually it's not. My stitches were kind of loose as they went over this rough bumpity bump area, and I didn't know how to tighten them up. So I ended up having to go back and put hot glue under the corners and things like that to make it hold, because it would pull loose. Plus, it isn't good for your machine needle. And as you're sewing, the thread will break when you're sewing this type, the rough type. The soft, fuzzy type is easy to sew with the sewing machine, but this is the one that gives me headaches. So I have found that hot glue does great, and if for any reason it does come loose, you can repair it very easily as well. So now this seems to have hardened, so you can just pinch it off like that. And I usually let it sit a while to get nice and cool before I start using the Velcro. And that's that. So now you're finished and your doll's ready to go. But there is one more optional step if you're so inclined, as I did on this polka dot top. I top stitch just above the ruffle. Not necessary, but it adds a tailored touch. Have fun!